How do Amish couples actually come together as husband and wife? What is truly allowed behind closed doors? What is completely forbidden? And what secrets do Amish women carry silently to their graves, never daring to speak them aloud, not even in a whisper to the women they love most? I can answer every single one of those questions. Not because I read about this in a book, not because I studied it from the outside looking in. I lived it. I was an Amish wife. I lay in that dark bedroom night after night. I followed those rules. I kept those secrets pressed so deep inside my chest, I thought they might stop my heart. And today, finally, after all these years, I am telling you everything. The one position the church silently approves. The acts classified as unforgivable sin. The clothing that stays on even in the most intimate moments. The darkness that never ever lifts. And what some couples quietly do behind closed doors that would shake their entire community to its foundations if anyone found out. Stay with me through this entire video. Every single minute pulls back another layer of something that has been hidden for over 3 centuries. And by the time we reach the end, you will understand Amish intimacy in a way no outsider has ever truly understood it before. My name is Sarah. I was old order Amish. I was a daughter, a wife, a mother, and a woman who spent decades not knowing her own body. This is the truth nobody is supposed to share. To understand why Amish intimacy works the way it does, you have to go all the way back to the year 1693. That is when Jacob Ammon broke away from the Swiss Mennonites over the question of strict church discipline. From that foundational moment, the Amish faith was constructed entirely on one central idea: total and complete separation from the world. Not just in clothing, not just in transportation, not just in the rejection of electricity, but in how you experience your own human body. The flesh was viewed as dangerous. Pleasure was treated as suspect. Your body did not belong to you. It existed to work, to bear children, and to glorify God through denial, never through enjoyment. That theology wasn't something soft or flexible. It hardened over 3 full centuries into something almost impenetrable, like stone. Everything in Amish life is governed by the ordning. Most outsiders have heard the word, but few understand what it truly means. It is not a written document. It is not a rule book you can open and read. It is a living, breathing, invisible code that controls every single detail of daily existence. The width of a hat brim, the style of a dress collar, the way a home is decorated, the words used in prayer. And the ordning does not stop at the bedroom door. It walks right through it. Within the Amish understanding of God's order, your body belongs first to God, second to your spouse, third to the community. The highest virtue a person can embody is Gelassenheit, total submission of the self. And the greatest sin a person can commit is Hoshmut, pride, personal desire, the act of wanting something for yourself in your most private, most vulnerable moment. That is Hoshmut at its most dangerous, they said. That is the sin hiding in the dark. But here is something that surprises every single person I tell it to. Nobody ever sits you down and actually explains the rules. There is no pamphlet, no counseling session, no honest human conversation between mother and daughter, no frank discussion between father and son. You absorb the rules the way you absorb the air around you, through sermons about purity that never name anything directly, through the way bodies are hidden beneath layers of plain fabric from childhood to grave, through a silence so thick and so consistent that it becomes its own kind of instruction. The silence itself teaches you. It teaches you that the body is shameful, that desire is dangerous, that asking questions is itself a form of sin. Let me tell you what Amish young men and women actually learn before they enter marriage, because understanding just how little we knew is the key to understanding everything that comes after. For boys, if they are lucky, truly lucky, their father pulls them aside sometime in the weeks before the wedding. The conversation, if it can be called that, lasts perhaps 90 seconds. My neighbor's son told me years later what his father said to him. "Be gentle with her. She doesn't know what to expect. Neither do you. God will guide you. Some fathers add a single practical instruction: you'll need to be on top. It goes where children come from. Many fathers say nothing at all, not a single word. They hand their son over to marriage the way you might hand someone a tool they have never seen before, in the dark, without instructions. Here is something that shocked me deeply when I first heard it, and it still shocks me to say it out loud. My friend Rebecca told me that her husband, a grown man, a kind man, a faithful man, genuinely believed on their wedding night that the navel was somehow involved in the process of conception. He had only ever observed cattle mating from behind at a distance. He assumed that human anatomy must function through the only opening he could locate by touch in complete and total darkness. They spent their entire wedding night completely lost, two young people reaching toward each other in confusion, neither one knowing enough to help the other. A single honest conversation, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, could have prevented all of it. Instead, they spent their first years of marriage piecing together the truth in silence and confusion, the way you might try to assemble something complicated without ever being given the instructions. Women's preparation is somehow even worse. My mother's entire talk with me happened while she was pinning my cape dress closed on the morning of my wedding. She did not meet my eyes. She focused on the fabric, on the pins, on her hands, anywhere but my face. Without looking at me, she said this: "Be still. Let him lead. It will hurt, but it won't hurt forever. He will plant his seed in your garden." Beautiful metaphors, completely useless information. I walked away from that conversation understanding less than I had before it started. I had more questions than answers, and no language at all in which to ask them. I had been told that pain was coming and that I should be still for it. I had been told nothing else. This is the foundation on which Amish marriage is built. Two people, young, faithful, eager to do right by God and by each other, stepping into the most intimate experience of human life with almost no knowledge, no vocabulary, and no permission to seek either. So what is officially allowed and what is classified as sin? These rules are never written anywhere, but they are ironclad. Every Amish woman of my generation knew them in her bones, even if she could not have recited them from a list. What is allowed? The husband on top, the wife beneath him, face to face. One position, one. It mirrors the theology perfectly. His authority, her submission. God over man, man over woman. Brief kissing is permitted. Touching through the fabric of the nightgown is permitted. The wife's hands resting on her husband's back are permitted. Completion inside the wife is required. This is for procreation, which is the only sanctioned purpose of the act. Quiet, whispered words are permissible. Prayer afterward is expected, almost mandatory. Now the forbidden list. And this is where I have watched jaws drop, because the forbidden list is far, far longer than the permitted one. Any oral contact between spouses is classified alongside sodomy. This prohibition traces directly back to medieval Catholic influence on Anabaptist theology, carried forward through centuries into the modern Amish church. Manual stimulation of the wife is forbidden. It serves no procreative purpose and therefore has no place in the marriage bed. The wife on top is absolutely forbidden. It violates the submission hierarchy that the entire Amish social structure is built upon. Side positions, rear positions. These are described as animalistic, worldly. Extended foreplay is forbidden. It centers pleasure over purpose, and pleasure is not the purpose. Complete nudity is forbidden. Even in total darkness, many Amish couples never fully undress. They have been married for decades and have never once seen each other's bodies clearly in light. Sounds of pleasure are forbidden, immodest. Discussion of desires is a worldly concept that has no place in a plain household. Any artificial product of any kind is forbidden. Contraception is absolutely forbidden. Even withdrawal is considered equivalent to the sin of Onan, described in Genesis chapter 38. The requirement for darkness evolved from something historical. During the early persecution of the Anabaptists, communities hid in attics and cellars. Being unseen was survival. Over generations, that practical necessity became theology. The silence rule followed the same path. What had once been required for physical safety transformed into moral teaching about humility and modesty. But here is what I need you to truly understand before we go any further. The rules are the rules. They are real and they carry real weight, and breaking them carries real consequences. But behind every single Amish bedroom door, in the one room in Amish life where no elder stands watching, where no community member can see, real human beings make their own quiet accommodations. They always have. They always will. In my marriage to Eli, the first year followed every rule without deviation. Darkness, silence, him above, me below, brief, mechanical. He would reach for me under the quilt in the dark, shift my nightgown, and begin. There was no kissing. There were no words. I felt nothing. No pleasure. No connection. No sense of being known or seen by the man I had promised my life to. I learned to manage the time by occupying my mind. I would plan tomorrow's chores while he moved above me in the dark. I would compose the grocery list in my head or think through which quilting pattern to begin next. When he finished, a sharp intake of breath, then perfect stillness, the silence that followed was somehow louder than anything that had come before it. I lay in that darkness and I felt something I did not have a name for. It was not grief, exactly. It was not anger. It was more like the feeling of standing at a window and watching something pass by that you can see through the glass but cannot touch. Something meant for you, happening without you. I told no one. There was no one to tell. Welcome back. If you are just joining, my name is Sarah. I was old order Amish for the first 32 years of my life. I was a wife and a mother and a faithful woman. In part 1, I told you about the rules. The long, ironclad, unwritten rule book that governs Amish intimacy. In part 2, I am going to tell you what actually happened, what really happens behind those closed doors, what I discovered in my own marriage, what my friends whispered to me during quilting bees and washing days when no one else could hear, and what I learned years later in a therapist's office that made me cry for an hour straight. Everything shifted slowly in the second year of my marriage to Eli. He was not a cruel man. I want to say that clearly because it matters. He was gentle, he was hardworking, he was faithful. He had been handed the same ignorance I had been handed, and he was navigating it with the same limited tools. But in our second year, something loosened. Something small and tentative crept into the darkness of our bedroom. He began kissing my neck. It sounds so small. It sounds like nothing, but in the context of everything I have just described to you, the rules, the silence, the complete absence of language around any of this, it was not nothing. It was enormous. I did not stop him. For the first time in my married life, something felt genuinely good. Not just endured, actually good. His hands began to change too. They began learning the shape of me, discovering through cautious exploration that certain touches changed my breathing, changed the tempo of it, made it catch in my throat. And I discovered something too, that shifting my hips created a friction that built towards something I could not name. My body chased it instinctively, the way water finds its way downhill. I didn't decide to chase it. I simply did. We never spoke a single word about any of this, not one. There were no conversations, no questions asked, no answers given. Each night pushed slightly further than the one before. Each touch was a silent question. Each response, a held breath, a turned hip, a hand that did not pull away, was a silent answer. We were building something together without ever once acknowledging we were building anything at all. By our 5th year, the nightgown came off sometimes, still in total darkness. But skin against skin, the simple human fact of it, felt revolutionary to me, like a door opening into a room I hadn't known existed. Around our 6th year of marriage, something happened that I have spent years trying to find the right words for. It was an ordinary night, nothing that began differently from any other. But that night, touch, and movement and angle came together in a particular way, and something built inside me that I had never experienced before. A wave of tension, a warmth that started deep and spread outward, a crescendo that I could not stop, could not slow, could not control. When it crested, my body shook. I gasped into the pillow to silence myself. The silence rule held even then, even in that moment. Afterward, I lay trembling in the dark, convinced that something was wrong with me. I pressed my hands together under the quilt, and I prayed, genuinely prayed, for forgiveness. For my own body's response to my own husband. I was certain I had sinned. I was certain that whatever had happened to me was a sign of something shameful, something broken, something that required confession. I would not learn what had actually happened until years later, sitting in a therapist's office in a city far from any farm I had ever known. That night, I was simply afraid of my own body. During quilting bees and washing days, those long, communal hours of women's work, I heard the full spectrum of what Amish women experience behind closed doors. These were not formal confessions. They were whispers, fragments, half-sentences completed by a knowing look. But over the years, they added up to a picture I could not have assembled any other way. My friend Mary had been married 15 years by the time I knew her well. She had 9 children. She was a devoted wife and a tireless mother and one of the most capable women I have ever known. She told me once, her voice flat with a kind of exhausted honesty, that during intimacy with her husband, she closed her eyes and counted the ceiling beams until he was done. Around 40 beams, she said. She had counted them so many times she could tell you the dimensions of each one. She had never felt a single moment of pleasure in 15 years of marriage. She ranked the experience somewhere below scrubbing the kitchen floor and above cleaning out the chicken coop, and she said it in a tone that made it sound like a perfectly reasonable thing to say. Because in her world, it was. My friend Leah was different. Leah whispered to me one afternoon with flushed cheeks and eyes that couldn't quite settle. She told me that sometimes she enjoyed it. And then, immediately, is that wrong? She had discovered, on her own, in the dark, through years of cautious exploration, that certain movements and certain angles produced a sensation she had no name for. And she was genuinely terrified that the sensation itself was sinful, that God might be watching, that her body's response was evidence of her own corruption. I told her, quietly, while our hands kept moving through the work so no one would notice we had stopped. If God made your body do that, how can it be sin? We stared at each other for a long moment after I said it. 2 women who had each discovered something in darkness independently, without anyone ever telling us it was real or valid or even possible. We had no language for it. We had no framework for it. We had found something profound and had been forced to carry it in complete silence because there was no other option. And then there was Ada. Ada was the woman I mentioned at the very beginning of this video. 20 years married, 11 children, the most devout woman I knew in our community, faithful, serious, deeply committed to the church and to God. She was the last person I would have expected to share what she shared. During a quilting bee, when the other women had drifted to the other side of the room and the 2 of us were briefly, impossibly alone, Ada told me something in a voice so low I had to lean close to hear it. She told me that her husband used his mouth on her, an act the church classifies as grave sin, an act requiring public confession before the congregation if discovered, an act that could result in the kind of shunning that tears a family apart. Her husband knew the risk. She knew the risk, and still. I cannot give it up, she told me. She wasn't crying. She was very still and very certain. It is the only time I feel like a person instead of a machine. I have thought about what Ada said every single day since she said it. That one sentence contains 20 years of marriage, 11 children, 300 years of theology, and one woman's insistence, quiet, private, unconfessed, on her own humanity. Behind the bedroom door, in the one unwatched room in Amish life, 300 years of rules had been overpowered by something far older than any rule. the simple, fundamental human need to feel alive, to feel like a person, to feel something. After I left the community, after the Maidong fell, after my family sealed their door against me, after my mother stopped writing and my sisters began looking through me as though I were glass, I started learning what had been hidden from me my entire life. My therapist, a kind woman in a small office with a window that looked out onto a parking lot, showed me a diagram of female anatomy during one of our early sessions. I sat there and I cried. Not softly, not politely. I cried for a long time because there on that laminated page was a part of my own body, a part that had been part of me my entire life, that was designed specifically and entirely for sensation. It has no reproductive function. It plays no role in procreation. It exists solely and completely for the experience of pleasure. And nobody had ever told me it existed. Not my mother, not my husband, not the church, not anyone. I was a grown woman. I had been a wife. I had borne children. And I had spent my entire adult life not knowing that this part of me existed, because 300 years of theology had decided that it did not deserve a name. I sat in that therapist's office and I wept for myself at 22, lying in the dark, terrified of her own body's response, pressing her hands together and asking God for forgiveness for something that required no forgiveness at all. I want to be clear about something. I am not angry at Eli. I mean that. He was as much a prisoner of the silence as I was. The ignorance we both carried into our marriage was not something we had chosen. It was something we had been given, handed to us carefully and deliberately from the time we were children. The ignorance was not accidental. It was by design. It was the architecture of a system built to keep the body subordinate to the church's authority by making sure no one ever knew enough to question anything. Eli never knew he was hurting me by knowing nothing. He never knew he was being hurt either. Two people reaching toward each other in the dark, each one missing the same pieces of the same puzzle, each one making the best of what they had been given. I carry no bitterness toward him. The Amish world gave me things I still carry with gratitude. Hard, honest work, a faith that ran deep and real, community, the genuine embodied experience of belonging to something larger than yourself, the smell of soil after rain, a quilt completed by lamplight with the women I loved best, the knowledge that I can do difficult things. I honor those gifts. I always will. But it stole years of my own story, my body's own story, the right to know myself, the right to know what I was capable of feeling, the sacred human experience of understanding the skin I actually live in. 300 years of silence pressed into one woman's life, into thousands of women's lives, passed from mother to daughter like an heirloom that no one ever chose and no one knew how to refuse. If you grew up in a world where your body was a secret kept from you, by religion, by culture, by silence, by shame, I see you. If pleasure had no name in your household, if your body was spoken of only as a danger or a tool or a burden, if the only instruction you were ever given was to be still and let it happen, I see you. And I want to tell you what no one told me until I was well into my 30s. Learning yourself is not sin. It is not pride. It is not hoshmut. It is not shameful, and it does not require confession, and it does not put your soul in danger. It is the most sacred reclamation you will ever make. Your body was not given to you as an instrument of someone else's theology. It was given to you to live in, to understand, to inhabit fully with curiosity and care and honesty. Leave me a comment. Tell me what surprised you. Tell me what moved you. If you're ready, tell me your own story. I read everyone, and I am grateful for everyone. Subscribe to Sarah's story. We have barely scratched the surface. The bedroom was just the beginning. The rules said one thing. The quilts knew another. And after 300 years, the bedroom remains the only room where the ordnung cannot see. Maybe that is exactly why they kept it so dark. Until next time, from one woman who found her way out of the silence to anyone still finding their way. Sarah, Former Old Order Amish.